I'm not the T in technology. This is in STEM even. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Eleanor Townsend from the University of Exeter Medical School. I use she, her pronouns as well, just to let everyone know. I'm going to apologise for this title to start off with. I submitted it to a conference and I thought, this will be like really grabby. No one seemed to care, and I was like, okay. But yeah, I just feel like the gay agenda is what I'm talking about, and it's just about having fair representation and inclusion, for me specifically within the medical curriculum. So I'm actually a microbiologist. So if people don't know what microbiology is, it's the biology of things that are really, really small. So anything that you need a microscope for is microbiology. These are just a few of microbes. So we've got bacteria, viruses, and fungi. I think these are Klebsiella. I can't remember now. Kind of irrelevant. The viruses in the middle, I'll come back to, but they're bacteriophage. And I don't know if I took that image myself or if I stole it off Google. But either way, I have taken some photos that look very similar. So there we go. And then the last one is fungi. That's just like Candida albicans is like the most famous one, and my favourite as well, probably. So yeah, that's just a bit of what I've done. So when I used to work in research, I started off with my PhD, which was looking at chronic infections, specifically in diabetic foot ulcers, and looking at like the microbial communities and how we could treat them, because basically, when they're together, they're harder to treat. They all help each other out, and then you have to get your leg chopped off. So I was trying to look at like different ways to try and treat that and combat that. I then did a short stint in tuberculosis, which was a lot of fun. Went to South Africa, did a lot of work there. And that was like the complete opposite of my chronic wound biofilms, because I was looking at aerosol transmission, so it's about as far away as you could get. I then moved to Warwick, where I spent time on 2 different projects. So back to those viruses that I mentioned previously, I was looking at bacteriophages. They're viruses that infect bacteria and bacteria only. So I was using them to treat Klebsiella bacteria, which are like really drug resistant. So that was a lot of fun. And we actually had some of our viruses sent off to Scandinavia to be used to treat a patient. So that was very nice. Felt like you were making a bit of a difference. And I also did some very like highbrow stuff on marine bacteria, which was quite a challenge. I realised like before the start of the project, but quite late, that they actually like photosynthesize and stuff, and it was like important for them to have light. They're actually like the biggest producer of oxygen on the planet, which is really, really cool. So forget trees, it's all about the ocean. So that was a lot of fun. Now I work as an education and scholarship role, which is a lot fancier than it actually is. Often I feel like a kind of like a glorified babysitter. But I'm a lecturer. I just teach. It comes with a lot of like different hats. So then I'm doing teaching and small group teaching, lecturers. I also have like a pastoral role, so I have groups of tutees. We also have the scholarship time. It's a bit like undefined, but we technically sort of do research around education, which is what I'm showing you today. I also have like a few little fun bits that are kind of, I don't know, it's just the cost of academia really. You get flexible, but you end up giving your labour for free on stuff. So I've done like widening participation things, which I don't mind doing for free. That's a lot of fun. I'm an associate editor at a journal, which is horrible, and I hate it. It's so much stress. And then I'm a student community champion as well, which I do enjoy, but like half the time students don't turn up to my events, which is really, really sad. So if any students are watching this on like Zoom or whatever, please come to my cinema screenings. So yeah, it's a bit different, but I really enjoy it. I really love it. My favourite thing about it is like making connections with the students, and you really feel like you're making a difference sometimes, even if like for me it's just like helping them through a panic attack over a calculation, but for them it's like a big deal. So it's really nice. Also, I just want to add this in. I typed lecturer in to get this image, and it took me like quite a while to scroll down and find one that wasn't like an old white man. So just a point. I like that image, so we went with it. That was probably too long of a background on myself, but I'll talk to you about my inclusive education work now. So this is actually inspired from my husband's time at medical school. He had a sort of gay day lecture, and then it was followed a week later by a trans day lecture. I just remember he came home and he was like, now, I know you're going to tell me that this is wrong, but they said that bisexual people enforce the binary of the gender binary, and I was just like slamming my head against the table. And then he was like, but they also said that the A is for allies. And I was like, no! Leave asexual people alone, they have it hard enough. So that's kind of where I came from. I feel bad slating them because they did try, but yeah, I'm not good enough. I'm horrible. So my kind of argument of why I decided to develop this. So sadly, LGBTQ plus people still face worse health outcomes compared to cis heterosexual counterparts. So same diseases but worse health outcomes. It's also for our students, our medical students themselves, doctors and other healthcare workers still face discrimination at work, and it's actually a GMC requirement, so that's the regulatory body for doctors, that students are educated in an inclusive environment. And a lot of students, when they graduate medical school, they're still reporting that they have no confidence and therefore competence in the area of treating LGBTQ plus people. So obviously that's something that I would quite like to change and help improve these future outcomes for LGBT people. A little bit at a time, but little bits. So a lot of what I've based my teaching modifications on is this Ward-Gale model. This is a massive 40-page document that came out of the University of Birmingham. It focuses on 3 key areas that we can make inclusive. It's got some really nice stories at the back of it of people talking about their experiences, so it's really good, and it's quite accessible as well. I say it's 40 pages long, but a lot of it is pictures, so it's quite nice to read. So the 3 areas are language, role models, and curriculum content. And then within these, they kind of have 3 levels to that. So increasing awareness, additive, and transformative practice. So for language, this is things like avoiding cis-heteronormative language and any discriminatory language. For role models, it can be as simple as just pointing out when there are LGBTQ plus events available to your students, having a mentor role, and then sort of creating the role models and allies within your teaching environment. And then finally onto curriculum. I don't know what's happened. Half of the labels have disappeared. I probably should have checked this a bit more thoroughly. Sorry. So you increase awareness of diversity of different people, and then having books and readings and including people who are LGBT within your material, and then having an actual inclusive practice for your pedagogy, which is a fancy way of saying teaching that no one can pronounce. So what I did with this is I started off, I wanted to get a baseline feel for how our curriculum was looking. So I took all the written materials from the first 2 years of the medical curriculum, and I sort of screened through it looking at this framework, which comes from this Oberdin-Melivier paper, and it's 16 areas. So we've got everything from just sexual orientation to special areas like adolescent health, mental health, a lot of different things. And this is what I screened to see. These topics are sort of unique to LGBTQ plus people. So that's what it's talking about, if these specific areas are discussed with regards to LGBTQ plus people. So I will say before I start talking about the results of this screening, actually, the medical curriculum is designed in this kind of way that it spirals round. So you cover like a broad range of stuff in your first year, and then you build on that in your second year, but a bit more specialized, and you keep going until you graduate. The first 2 years are very much, you do have clinical time, but it's not as much as you will have later. By the time you sort of graduate, you're spending a lot of time in clinic. So that's why I focused on the first 2 years for my audit, was because that's where a lot of this written stuff is. So the kind of written stuff that I looked at lecture slides. These LSRCs, these are like interactive workshop sessions. A lot of like Menti quizzes and stuff, if anyone does those. A lot of fun. And then PBL as well, which is a real core to the medical curriculum. So PBL is problem-based learning. This is where you're given a case or two. Students set their own questions they want to know about the case. It can be anything from like, what is the anatomy of the lower limb, to how do health inequalities affect the patient in this case, and just anything, everything. And those sessions are facilitated, so we guide the students in what they should be asking and make sure that they cover like the main learning outcomes, so they don't go off and learn about something completely random. There's a lot more lectures, even though I've just said that PBL is the core, but they have one of those every 3 weeks, so it takes a lot of their time. But yeah, there is a lot more lectures to go through compared to everything else. So overall, I scored stuff as if it did have representation of those areas that I showed in the previous slide, if it had scope to include them, or if it didn't have scope or representation, or it wasn't necessary. A lot of it does fall into this non-applicable category, because as I talked about the sort of spiral, a lot of it is like cell signaling or basic microbiology, things that don't specifically affect LGBTQ plus people differently. So and sort of shoehorning it into that sort of session would just be stupid and just wouldn't work. So it's completely unnecessary. So it's this kind of significant scope bar is what we're trying to really look at and focus. So it also varied a lot depending on the. Oh, I didn't give our like. We did have some representation. Yay! I just completely missed over that bit. I was like, we need to get better. No, we do have some representation, which is good and nice. It varies a lot depending on the block. So 0 to 8 is the first year blocks. So they have 3-week blocks that are like a theme. So you can see for these first year, they're very sort of basic biology sort of things like musculoskeletal. I can't say that either. And then I can't say anything today. The nervous system, this sort of thing, they're very basic biology. And then in their second year, it's building up and it's getting more complicated. So they're looking at stuff like aging and movement. So it gets a bit more multifaceted and interesting. But not that the other stuff's not interesting, but complicated, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So when we did have our sort of examples, you can see that the most representation was actually in these 2 blocks here, which is the development block and the carcinogenesis block. So through the PBL cases, that's where a lot of the representation came in. So for the development block, they have a teenager who's come in to visit their GP, and it's initially about acne, but then as they're talking to the GP, they express their feelings of gender dysphoria. So students are very keen to explore like how you would help that patient, where would you go, what services would you refer on to, and so I only teach in the first year PBL course, but one of the second year PBL teachers, she said like she really enjoys talking about it with the students, and they really enjoy exploring that kind of issue. And then for the carcinogenesis, it's actually, I think he has lymphoma, but there's a poor guy with lymphoma. He ends up dead by the end of the case. It's quite sad, but he has a husband. It would be nice if he didn't die and it had a happy ending, but I don't know if it's realistic. I don't write these cases or anything, and I think clinical people do. I don't know if people should or shouldn't die, but it sounds like I'm playing God. I don't know what I'm saying. There's a lot of other inclusions. So as well, there's another same-sex couple in the first year. It's not really explored a whole lot, which I think is quite sad. So it's a man with cardiovascular health problems, and he ends up only going back to the doctor when his husband nags him. And my kind of experience with that case, unfortunately, like the first week I had COVID, so we were doing the session online, and I was like dying slightly. And I didn't notice that this patient, Matthew, had a husband. And then when we were in the discussion and they were all talking about their findings, they were doing a bit of sort of like social factors. And I said, oh, did you notice that like Matthew had a husband? Because it was literally one line and like it was very easy to miss. And a student literally turned around to me and said, yeah, but it doesn't affect his cardiovascular disease. And I just thought it was for a diversity quota. And I was like, oh, okay. We'll just move on then. I thought it was a shame. It wasn't really like, so for us as facilitators, we get like a sheet of notes and we can, it sort of says for us like what's good ideas for them to explore. And it's not really like highlighted on there. So that's something that I've kind of put forward that we could add a couple of bullet points on there. And a lot of the other facilitators have mentioned to me as well that sometimes they don't feel very confident in exploring these areas. So one of the things that comes up in, I think, the nervous system block is about sort of gender differences accessing healthcare. And one of the other facilitators, she had discussed with me that she had sort of tried to talk about LGBT issues, and do you think LGBT people have different attitudes to accessing healthcare? And apparently the students all just shut down and like didn't feel confident talking about it. I think she said they didn't want to be cancelled, which I was like, it's okay to ask questions. And then she didn't want to push it, so it didn't kind of end up opening a discussion, which was quite sad. So I've just blabbered on about PBL for ages, but we do have representation in there, and PBL is a really nice place to explore it. You'll see why I'm blabbering on about PBL. It'll come back. So going back to the framework, which I showed before, I tried to sort of categorize where our representation was in that framework. So obviously a lot of it was in sexual orientation. Every time they sort of said homosexual or bisexual or anything, it sort of got a tick in that box. But there was also a lot more of these sort of different areas that are maybe a bit more faceted, like mental health and adolescent health, barriers to healthcare. So there was a lot of different things. And then for intersex people, there was some of this explored in like endocrine setting and also the anatomy setting. So where I'm going forward with this, so I've estimated, I watched a previous Prison Talk yesterday on YouTube, and I was like, this person would know. The person who was from like the Office of the Statistics, and I was like, and doing the census, and I was like, they would know, but I just kind of guessed that around 4% of the UK identifies as LGBTQ+. So I'm hoping that I can make a case that a minimum of 4% of our curriculum should represent LGBTQ+ people. I think as well, a lot of the undergraduate students that start medicine, they're very young. Some of them are 18, some of them are 19, and they come in and they've got quite sheltered lives. They haven't been exposed to much. Maybe they're from a small town and stuff. So I think for some of them, they just haven't thought about these things, which is why I'm trying to just increase their exposure to diverse people. I kind of mentioned the bioscience thing before, but I kind of want to avoid students turning around to me and saying this is just to fulfill a diversity quota. So I want to make the teaching meaningful and that students actually learn from it as well. There's like this whole thing in like pedagogical teaching research now where it's not about what you're teaching students, it's about what the students are learning. It's kind of like the reverse way around. So I really want to try and find ways that will help students actually learn these things. There's also like medical students are quite stressed. They have a lot to learn. So it's hard to cram any extra things into the curriculum, but then on top of that, they're like, if this isn't on the exam that I need to pass, I maybe don't want to learn it. So I'm trying to find ways that I can actually like pass the significance of these issues onto them, and not be tokenistic with it. So what next? So this audit was just the start of my diabolical plan to take over the world with the gay agenda. There's actually like other frameworks are available, and looking at some of those as well, there's some really nice things about like maternity, which I hadn't previously thought about. I was thinking about this a lot over the summer, and then I guess in my head I'm calling it like fertility equality. I don't know if that's like the right term, but like for same-sex couples to have the same access to IVF as opposite-sex couples. So that was nice, but I feel like if you're 18 and like you probably wouldn't be thinking about these things. So even for a few years, I'm going to be like, oh, did you know? Just hasn't always been this good. On top of that, I currently have a research student who is looking at how we can avoid perpetuating stereotypes and stigma around HIV through our medical teaching. He's a great student. I probably should have invited him to this, but I kind of forgot. But yeah, he's really good and really keen on doing it. And then why I've been so into talking about PBL is I've joined forces with the two heads of PBL, and they're really good. They couldn't be, I don't know, one of them might be on Zoom, I'm not sure. But we're joined forces, and I'm really excited for this project, and they're really excited as well. We're kind of continuing this on, but with more diversity aspects. So we're going to try and make like a web diagram where you almost, you tell we're all scientists, we're like, no, we have to give things scores and numbers. So you give scores to the representation, and then it will produce a nice diagram like this. I've cut the bot off, but I think that was patient experience, so they've got loads of representation in. So that's what we're planning to do, and we're looking at not only gender identity and sexual orientation, but also religion and belief, race and ethnicity, disability, and socio-economic background. No, is that only 5? I keep forgetting the 6th one. I'm sure it is important. It's equally as important, but I just cannot remember it for the life of me. But we're doing 6 areas. We're hoping to get students involved with that, and we're applying for some funding soon. So that's the one thing we're doing. And then on top of that, we started to introduce, this is the Lo-Fi Girls meant to represent thinking. So we're introducing some reflection tasks for the students to do. So when they have their 3 weeks across a block, they set their questions for PBL in the first one, and then the next 2 they discuss their answers. And so in the middle session, we're going to sort of give them a scenario. There's some of these already present in the curriculum where you sort of say, oh, what if, so the most recent one was like, what if this person's spinal injury was showing these different symptoms, and then, you know, they had to be like, oh, well, maybe that would mean that the injury was in a different place and all of this. So we're hoping to develop some of those going forward. We're going to trial a couple this year in both the first year and the second year, and then introduce more going forward. It's also good because we partly mark them on their like reflection, and at the moment we don't really have a way to assess it, so I just give everyone full marks. So it would be good, not for the students probably, but for me as a marker. So I guess when I was writing this, this is kind of like the even softer bit of my talk. I was just reflecting on like the fact that as part of this framework, we should be role models, and just my experiences going through trying to be a role model. So I'm a bisexual woman. I'm absolutely awful at being out. I've touched myself to the microphone. I recently married, my husband's just snuck in the back, he was the guy that was late. I'm married to a man, so I'm about as straight passing as they come. And by happen chance, I put in cycle into like the icons finder, and it came up in the pan flag colours, and I was like, oh look, it's meant to be. But just I kind of go through this cycle of I don't know. You have like these formative experiences when you're a teenager, and my experience anyway. I don't know if other bisexual people found this, but people are like, you're just lying, you're just making up your bisexuality. And then you sort of think, oh my God, what if I am making it up? Maybe I do just want attention. Like, what is going on? And then you're like, no, like, you are bi, you think bi thoughts, you are bi. And then you're like, yeah, but I'm married to a man, like, I'm not like, I don't face as much discrimination, like, I don't deserve to be in queer spaces. And then you're like, yeah, but you're not straight either. And it's just like this whole mess of going round and just like a lot of crying and stress. And then I'm like, why would I make this up when it just perpetually causes me stress? Like, who would put themselves through this torture, like, to just get some attention? Me, apparently. No, I do. I am bisexual. I'm not making it up. And I put this little ghost in icon as well, because sometimes I kind of feel like, one, invisible, but then two, it's also like you put the sheet on and you're one thing, and then you take the sheet off and you're something else. But really, I'm just straight up a ghost. So, yeah, I did that. That was chaos, but that's my mind with being a bisexual woman. And then I was thinking, like, how do I put this forward to try and be a role model that I'm advocating for? I put these pictures up because I feel like growing up, the only bisexual woman I knew was Anna Paquin, so there she is in X-Men, and like she was hella cool, so that was good representation to me. I was like, maybe I just need to get my blonde streak in the front again, like maybe that's all I need to do. And then I also put Ian McKellen here because I remember seeing this when I was about like 15 and just being like, it just seemed to me like such a statement. Like, he's literally just wearing a t-shirt, but it was just like, I never really experienced anyone being that just like boldly gay and just being like, this is it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that was really quite impactful for me. And also, I love Lord of the Rings, so that was like a double win there for Ian McKellen. Yeah, so basically, I don't know how to be a role model, but I'm trying. I'm present. I have. This was accidental, but I bought my rainbow mug. Like I try and accessorize with rainbows everywhere. And I'm just trying my best. And I'll always offer support to people and stick up for people. And I guess my best is all I can do. So thank you for bearing with me through my chaos. And that's it.